I had a feeling deep down that things would turn out this way after breaking off the engagement. Right after we got engaged, Ryan became suddenly distant. He showered Jake with unusual kindness while ignoring my opinions, pushing for this wedding. I tried to stay positive and keep my spirits up, but I never expected him to announce the end of our engagement. I takes him cordially, and even though I saw it coming, facing it as a reality was a big shock. I really wanted to lash out at Ryan immediately, but I held back. It wasn't the right time. Understood. I replied with a cold, calm voice. I hung up the phone right after that. It was Ryan who had mentioned breaking off the engagement. I knew what had to be done. There were a heap of issues to address right in front of me, but I decided to make Ryan pay for neglecting me and Jake's feelings. My name is Sarah. I'm 42 and a deputy director at a certain company. I have a 6-year-old son named Jake. I had divorced my ex-husband, so I was a single mom. The reason for our divorce wasn't infidelity or anything like that. It was due to differences in personality and values. Even though I was busy with work, I always cherished my time with Jake. But it seemed my ex-husband didn't feel the same. Probably he couldn't stand the fact that I earned more than he did. Our disagreements became constant, and considering the impact on Jake, I chose to divorce. I've never regretted that decision. A few years passed and Ryan, my later fiancé, came into my company as a business partner. Ryan was a regular employee but mentioned that he'd be promoted to section chief within a few years. Ryan, more than 10 years my junior, was 28 at the time. At first, I didn't see him romantically, but as he actively pursued me, I began to take notice. He said he was attracted to my mature and responsible nature. Seeing him getting along with Jake during our days off felt wonderful, and after dating for 2 years, we got engaged when I was 42 and he was 30. After some time being engaged, Ryan said, "Let's actually tie the knot on the day of the wedding ceremony. I think it feels more special that way." I could understand where Ryan was coming from, but I wasn't too excited because I had already had a wedding ceremony with my ex-husband. Even though I invited friends to that wedding, the fact that we ended up getting divorced still weighed on me. I wanted to have the wedding ceremony as Ryan wished, but I felt hesitant. I honestly told him about my feelings, but Ryan brushed it off, saying no one cares about that. When he said that, I felt I had no choice but to agree. However, I stated I wouldn't invite any guests. I don't have many friends, and after already receiving wedding gifts once, I felt awkward asking for them again. So, I told him I'd only invite my parents. Ryan became unhappy with this. He said it would look unbalanced with his side having more guests. "It'll seem like I'm showing off. Please invite someone." Feeling pressured, I reluctantly reached out to some friends. Luckily, they happily agreed to attend, but they declined to give wedding gifts. The customary gift for a friend's wedding is $300. Given the current economic situation, it's not a small amount. When I told Ryan, he clicked his tongue in annoyance. He was likely concerned about the increased cost since we wouldn't be receiving gifts. I got a glimpse of Ryan's unpleasant side, which made me feel uneasy. However, I had a well-thought-out financial plan. Since my divorce from my ex-husband, I had saved money, including some from even before that time. At Taken Creations, it wasn't a huge amount, but it was sufficient to cover the wedding gifts for a few friends. When I told this to Ryan, he clicked his tongue in annoyance again. "It'd be better if we didn't invite them at all," he exclaimed. Just then, Jake came out of the bathroom. Instantly, Ryan's attitude shifted, and he began interacting with Jake as if he were the perfect father. Without being asked, he offered to help Jake with his homework. Jake didn't seem to mind, so I let it be. Recently, Ryan had been colder towards me, but he remained kind to Jake. That was the only comfort I had during our engagement. Darren, I couldn't shake off this feeling of unease. Before we got engaged, Ryan was kind no matter the circumstances. But as soon as we became engaged, it was as if he changed into a completely different person. This filled my heart with a sense of unease. After several discussions, we decided to go ahead with the wedding. Ryan took charge of most of the preparations, so I didn't have much to do. 6 months passed, and we were just a month away from the wedding. Throughout this time, I continued to feel that something was off. Ryan was genuinely a great father when he was with Jake. However, when it was just the two of us, he showed a colder side and our arguments increased day by day. We were still only engaged, but it felt like we were living as a couple just going through the motions. To be honest, I wasn't comfortable. Jake looked up to Ryan and thought we were already remarried since he didn't understand the details. So, I couldn't bring myself to make the decision to leave Ryan. With my ex-husband, it was easier since Jake had said, "But Dad doesn't pay attention to me, so I don't like him." However, with Ryan, he actively spent time with Jake, taking him out almost every weekend. I put up with it and kept a smile on my face. We would be the perfect family everyone envies. At some point, I realized I had placed these constraints on myself, always holding back. Luckily, due to a busy period at work, I tried not to think about Ryan. As time went on, we were almost at our wedding date. We hadn't officially registered our marriage yet, so there was still time to choose a different path. But I thought it was too soon to decide and prioritize Jake's well-being in my actions. One day, Jake expressed a desire to stay at his grandmother's house. It was an unexpected request. It was summer, and he was on school vacation. It was a yearly tradition for Jake to stay at my family home in the countryside during this season. So this year he wanted to visit there again. Usually, I would have taken this time to enjoy some alone time. However, the circumstances were different now. Brian, who had been cold towards me, would be at home too. I tried to persuade Jake to stay, but Ryan suddenly said, "I have a business trip anyway and can't take him out, so it's fine." Relieved, I sent Jake off with a smile. At the same time, Brian left for his supposed business trip, saying he'd be away for a few days. We hadn't had major fights recently, but we bickered frequently. I remembered having small disagreements with my ex-husband too, so maybe this was normal for couples. I had stopped being bothered by Ryan's attitude and our arguments, but now that I was free from them, I felt refreshed. I tried to ask Ryan about his business trip, but he told me not to interfere with his work, and I couldn't get any details. He became worried when I didn't hear from him, so I sent him an email, only to be scolded saying it was bothersome. At that moment, it felt like a string inside me snapped. Until now, I had endured thinking that if I made sacrifices, Jake would be happy. But I had reached my breaking point. And that breaking point came abruptly. As things progressed, the day of the wedding ceremony next month arrived. Considering the guests who'd agreed to attend, canceling wasn't really an option. This morning, Ryan said he had some business and would join me later, hurriedly leaving the house. Because of that, Jake and I headed to the venue by ourselves. This being Jake's first wedding ceremony, he seemed truly excited. But as time went on, there was no sign of Ryan. He wouldn't even answer his phone. Moreover, I noticed something strange going on. From the conversations of the staff, I learned that not a single guest invited to by Ryan had arrived. There were attendance lists and seating charts, and since Ryan had been the main person handling things, there shouldn't have been any issues. There shouldn't have been any mistakes. But the church ceremony was to start in about 30 minutes, but with Ryan nowhere to be seen. I called him. After 2 rings, Ryan answered with a lethargic voice. Taxes. What do you want? Stop calling me over and over. This wasn't the time for such remarks. I demanded to know where he was and why none of his guests had shown up. Sensing my panic, Brian chuckled and said, "Of course they're not here. I didn't inform anyone about the wedding, not even my parents." I was left speechless. For a moment, I was silent, my hand trembling as I held the phone. Then, I caught the worried gaze of Jake and snapped back to reality. Struggling to keep my voice steady, I asked, "So what happens to our engagement?" Even though we hadn't officially registered our marriage, we had been living as a genuine family. I'd made many sacrifices hoping for Jake's happiness, but to Ryan, perhaps it didn't matter at all. While feeling utterly dejected, I awaited Ryan's answer. Finally, with zero understanding of my feelings, Ryan coldly said, "I think we should break off the engagement." Although I had a hunch things might come to this, facing this reality was devastating. I wanted to lash out at Ryan right then, but I held back. "Actually, now wasn't the time," I replied in an eerily calm voice. "Understood," and immediately hung up. My course of action was now clear. While numerous issues lay before me, I resolved to handle them one by one and teach Ryan a lesson for disregarding my and Jake's feelings. The next day, Ryan called repeatedly. On the voicemail, there were numerous frantic messages from him. But I felt no obligation to answer, So I blocked his calls and sent a short message saying there was nothing left to discuss. When he persisted with replies to the email, I simply ignored them and turned off notifications. Then, realizing I had returned to my parents' house, he came over. It happened to be when I was taking a bath, so my mother dealt with Ryan. I could hear them arguing at the entrance. My parents felt relieved when I decided to respond, but they warned that if the argument intensified, they'd call the police. Hearing that, Ryan clicked his tongue in annoyance and ranted, "Hey, what's this document demanding payment for the wedding expenses? I found it at home. Are you mocking me?" Ryan had finally shown his ugly side. Up to this point, he had only shown coldness, but now I realized this crude language was his true nature. But I was the one who felt mocked. I responded with a composed attitude. "Of course, after all, you were the one who insisted on this wedding. Even when I was reluctant, moreover, you pretended to invite guests and in reality didn't send any invitations by all accounts. You should be the one paying." Upon saying that, Ryan's face turned beet red as he retorted he argued he hadn't eaten or drunk anything at the wedding, and since he didn't actually invite any guests, he didn't want to pay. Annoyed, I decided to silence Ryan by confronting him with a certain truth. "You're still making those excuses after all this. It's just like you to prioritize the woman you're having an affair with and bail on our wedding day with a fake emergency note given you didn't invite any guests. This must have been part of your plan all along." As I spoke with a mocking smile, Ryan stared wide-eyed at me, then muttered something in a low voice. "I wasn't just gonna sit back and tolerate everything. Once I decide to do something, I gotta see it through." I'd grown suspicious when Ryan went on a dubious business trip. He refused to tell me where he was and blocked my texts. Given his distant behavior up to that point, I couldn't help but suspect he was cheating. I found a nearby detective agency, met with them a few times, and got them on the case. Sure enough, they discovered Ryan was having an affair. The other woman's name was Kate, a 29-year-old waitress at a local diner. Shockingly, I learned that Ryan and Sarah had been seeing each other since a few weeks before our engagement. The detective deduced this timeline from conversations they had on their supposed anniversary. This meant that while dating me, Ryan had been carrying on with Kate as well. When I found out, I was less angry and more devastated. Ryan and Sarah's affair was of course still ongoing. Just yesterday, Ryan, being suspicious as usual, said he had business to attend to. I had a detective tail him, which is how I found out the real reason he bailed on our plans. Ryan, unaware I'd uncovered his cheating, turned pale and fled when confronted with the evidence. After that business trip, I consulted a lawyer with the investigative report that the detective had compiled about Ryan's infidelity. Even though we weren't legally married, I absolutely refused to let this slide without effect. So I wondered if there was any way to get compensation from Ryan and Kate. However, contrary to my expectations, the lawyer said that it seems I can't claim compensation from Ryan for his infidelity, We had planned to split the wedding costs, so I really didn't want to pay my share. I was wondering if there was any way to make Ryan bear the entire cost. In the midst of these secret consultations with the lawyer noticed something reading the investigative report. It became clear that Ryan was seriously in love with Kate. Someday, moreover, the lawyer pointed out that Ryan seemed to view me as nothing more than a cash cow, with plans to ditch me in the future. It felt impossible to have a wedding in such circumstances. I was too heartbroken over the lengthy period of Ryan's affair to go through the entire report, but when the lawyer mentioned these points, I had to agree. As the lawyer, from his experience, suggested that what Ryan and Kate were doing might amount to marital fraud, and that there might be ulterior motives for Ryan pushing the wedding. I then asked if in the worst-case scenario, Ryan was trying to ruin the wedding on purpose to get back at me, could I claim all the expenses for the ceremony? The lawyer responded that, given all the evidence at hand, claiming would indeed be possible. So, I decided to act like I was fooled by Ryan. At that time, I had recorded everything, from his casual remarks at the venue to comments made at his parents' house. The detective's report clearly stated that Ryan's decision not to invite any guests was intentional harassment, and Kate was an accomplice. Their rather childish motives seemed to be to revel in seeing me flustered. Not knowing they were being tailed by a detective, they unwittingly provided all the evidence I needed to claim full compensation for the emotional distress and wedding expenses. I expressed my gratitude for their careless chatter. On the wedding day, I explained the situation to the guests and converted the event into a simple dinner party. After refunding all the gifts, I headed straight to the lawyer's office, but the lawyer was flabbergasted, saying he hadn't seen someone so naive in a long time. He promptly prepared the necessary documents for claiming compensation and emotional distress, allowing me to leave a prepared divorce notice and those papers at our home. That's how I got to where I am now. Even if Ryan anticipated a divorce, he probably never expected to face compensation claims so quickly. After he ran away, I received numerous apology emails, which I promptly deleted without reading. Such shallow apologies were nowhere near acceptable. Moreover, I knew that a legal notice had been sent to Kate detailing everything. Given that she lived with her parents, it was only a matter of time before everything came to light. Things were progressing so smoothly that I had to work hard to contain my excitement. A few days passed, and Ryan and Kate came to see me. Ryan looked pale and gaunt, as if he had been through a lot these past days. However, though Kate seemed indifferent, behaving as if this was someone else's problem. I didn't know you two were engaged. And as for me faking sickness, I was really feeling bad the other day, and I just called Ryan for help. I hadn't yet told either of them about the solid evidence I had gathered. I had only told them that I had hired a detective, so Kate probably thought she could feign ignorance. But to make matters worse, she started to lash out at me. You knew I was living with my parents when you sent that certified mail, right? Thanks to you, my mom found out everything and I got kicked out. Now I should be the one asking for compensation. I couldn't help but laugh when I heard that. Kate looked stunned, unable to comprehend why I found it funny. It seemed like Kate planned to put all the blame on Ryan and get away without any responsibility. But I wasn't gonna let that happen. We are both adults in our late 20s, and she should be accountable for her actions. I shot Kate a stern look, and she flinched, her eyes darting left and right. Sorry to break it to you, but I have evidence proving that you knew Ryan was involved with someone else when you started seeing him. Ryan, you were just using me to end up with your side chick, weren't you? You approached me for my money from the start, and when it came time to dump me, you tried to humiliate me during our wedding. Am I right? And according to the detective's findings, the two knew each other before meeting me. Apparently, they weren't dating at that time. However, Ryan was burdened with student loans from college, unable to lead a lavish life. Alert Kate, even though she had a massive debt from her parents and banks, was still living on a part-time job, unable to repay anything. Even though they were aware of their romantic feelings for each other, they believed they couldn't find happiness by marrying in their current situation. Thus they hatched a despicable plan, and I unfortunately became their target. Well, I was a single mother. I had saved enough money to raise Jake on my own. But despite being a single mom, I held a significant position in my company. Ryan probably thought I was making a good amount of money and approached me to execute his marriage fraud plan. The reason he didn't officially marry me was that he didn't want any blemish on his public record. He probably thought living together would be treated as if we were married and hoped to get some of my savings when we broke up. Unfortunately for him, the savings I had been accumulating were my separate property and wouldn't be subject to division. When I told him this, Ryan was devastated. Are you kidding? If I was gonna get sued. As expected, his reaction just made me shake my head and chuckle. I then turned to Kate, ready to expose her ambitions. Didn't you have an illness when you were younger that prevents you from having children for the rest of your life? You wanted a family with Ryan, and saw an opportunity with me since I had Jake, right? You also knew I had money, but targeting me was your mistake. I'm not that gullible. When I confronted them, they both recoiled in fear. I was most hurt by the fact that Ryan was pretending to be kind to Jake to eventually take him away from me. There was nothing left to discuss with them directly. I told them that from now on, all dealings would be through my attorney. But Ryan made one last desperate plea. I think I was a good father figure for Jake. You saw how close we were. Maybe we should hear what Jake thinks. The mere mention of Jake's name by Ryan disgusted me. And to add insult to injury, Kate shouted, "Exactly. Jake would definitely prefer a young mom like me over an old lady like you." I was left speechless by their audacity. As I stood there in shock, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Jake, who had been doing his homework upstairs. Upon seeing Ryan and Kate, Jake immediately said, "Someone who hurts my mom isn't my dad." Ryan was visibly shaken by Jake's words. But despite being only 6 years old, Jake had sensed Ryan's exaggerated kindness towards him and the occasional coldness Ryan showed me. When I had mentioned going to my parents' house, Jake had happily asked if he could spend time with his grandpa. I realized how strong Jake truly was, especially after the incident at the wedding ceremony. During this, Jake began to cry. He then turned to Kate, who was standing next to Ryan and probably glaring at her, and said, "My mom's the only mom for me." "And who are you, old lady?" Kate, being referred to as an old lady, seemed highly offended and replied, "You're just being rude," with her voice trembling. Be concerned for Jake. I stepped in between them, shielding him from her. I took a deep breath, ready to deliver the final blow to Kate. It's really pathetic for an adult to retort to a 6-year-old. "You're getting so red, did I hit a nerve? And you should be careful with your constant lies. The diner you work at, isn't it operated by the company my father runs?" He didn't recognize the family name. Upon hearing that, Kate's face turned ghostly white. After pausing for a moment, seemingly deep in thought, she looked at the family name on the sign in front of my childhood home, which made her even paler. She muttered things like, "This can't be true. In no way." But when she saw my father's face, her face went from pale blue to stark white. Though she kept apologizing, my father's stern expression didn't waver. Startled by my father's outburst, both of them fled without looking back. Because of their blinded desires, they involved others and as a result, would face severe consequences. I sued Ryan for emotional damages and for the costs of the wedding venue. On top of that, they were taken into custody by the police for the marriage scam. I heard they were given a suspended sentence. The subsection Ryan's parents, after hearing about the situation, apologized to me and covered all the expenses Ryan owed me. Now, Ryan is back at his family home, working tirelessly from dawn to dusk to help with the family business. However, he's earning almost nothing to repay the debts and is virtually confined to the property. His news of this incident spread among Ryan's friends, ruining his social relationships. His having a criminal record will surely darken his future prospects. It came to light that Kate habitually feigned sickness to skip work, leading to cold stares from her colleagues. She was close to being promoted but ended up quitting. She's now homeless, living on the streets, and has become unemployed. But the two of them broke up, and it seems their dreams of a happy future were crushed, leading them to live lonely lives. I've decided not to remarry primarily for Jake's sake. While it's beneficial for a child to have a father, I wasn't longing for that, and though I may face criticism for being a single mother, the definition of happiness is determined by the individual, not by outsiders. I plan to support Jake until he becomes independent, ensuring he doesn't face any hardships. Let's live with my parents starting from today. And they're my parents, so you won't mind, right? My husband suddenly said this. I was shocked, holding back tears. I stood in front of him. It's only been a few days since my father's funeral. This was just a few days after my father, who had battled illness, passed away. The chaos of the funeral was still fresh. Ignoring my feelings, my husband packed his things and left. His destination was the villa that I had just inherited, which my father cherished. Shockingly, his parents were waiting there, and they decided to stay at the villa. My name is Natalie. I just turned 33, and have just started out as an independent designer. I married Alex, and we have been living together in an apartment we signed for 3 years now. Perhaps I'm quite well known in my field as a designer. I have a good income, so the apartment is under my name, not my husband's. I lost my mother when I was in college, and within this past year, my father was diagnosed with a malignant tumor. In other words, cancer. Atali, he was undergoing treatment, but it seemed like his time was near, and even the primary doctor suggested preparing for the worst. Although I lived away from home when I lost my mother, after joining a design firm, my father always kept in touch and maintained our relationship. The news of my dear father's illness hit me hard, as his condition worsened. "How's your father doing?" The doctor said. "What? Is it that bad? Should I, as his son-in-law, visit him?" My husband would frequently ask about my father's health, but his tone seemed less about concern and more like he was anticipating my father's death. He always seemed discontented because he earned less than me. I wished he would be proud of my career achievements and support me. However, his behavior was like that of a competitive child. My father said he wants us to cherish our time together and not worry about him. "But your father will be gone soon, right? So we should spend more time with him now, so we won't regret it later." I couldn't help but increasingly feel disgusted towards my husband. Initially in our marriage, he was loving, and our time together was always pleasant. But his insensitivity towards my father's illness was agonizing. I couldn't accept the change in him. He works from home. I also planned to work from home after becoming independent, but he said he couldn't concentrate, so I had to rent a separate office, requiring me to commute. It was convenient for visiting my ailing father, but my husband, despite being home most of the time, never helped with chores. I managed my father's hospital visits, made necessary arrangements, and completed my work tasks. Yet when I returned home, I would find the mess he made, dirty dishes, and leftover food. He only sought his own comfort and was indifferent to my struggles and stress. I felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness and exhaustion. Eventually, my father passed away. During his lifetime, we had decided to dispose of our family home. So, while traveling from the hospital to the funeral home, I was busy with funeral preparations. However, while Alex was with me, he was either making calls, disappearing, or focusing on himself, not helping at all. "Alex, please help me. It's hard for me to handle all of this by myself, especially now." I tried telling him, but he took a call just as he was about to respond, and later, he just laughed it off, saying, "I'm busy with work." His anger and disappointment towards my husband grew inside me. Was it because I lost my father too soon? His words felt even colder. Upon the funeral day, he was deeply engrossed in conversations with his parents, and every time they returned, they all had smug smiles on their faces. The other attendees looked at us with strange eyes, and they felt increasingly isolated. Still, I managed to complete the funeral and burial smoothly, and also wrapped up the inheritance procedures. My husband suddenly proposed, "Let's start living with my parents from today." They're my parents, so you shouldn't mind, right? If you do, then maybe we should get a divorce. He said this with a smirk. I was in turmoil, my grief over losing my father momentarily pushed aside as I urgently responded. Live together where? In this apartment? Answers by isn't any room. How would that work? It's the lack of room was because we turned one room into an office and another into storage for his work materials. Well, our apartment is family friendly, my husband had always said materials. And us used it lavishly. We're not having kids. Fix with a grin, my husband said, "It's that villa you inherited." I was dumbstruck. Although we had sold the family home, I had kept the villa because it was my father's favorite, and of course, I had inherited it. That place was filled with memories of my father and held a special place in my heart. I intended to maintain it as per his last wishes, but my husband seemed to disregard my feelings entirely. We really shouldn't use that villa. But he wouldn't listen. Very incredibly, he said that his parents had already canceled their apartment lease and finished moving into the villa. They probably communicated about this during my father's funeral, delegating responsibilities for the move. He likely believes the villa, being more spacious than our current place and located in a quiet area, would be a better living space. But that villa is filled with memories of my father. Living there with you all will be difficult. Remember that, even though I protested, the move for his parents had already begun. When I pointed this out, he couldn't even hide his irritation. You always think only about yourself. Was always busy caring for your father, always getting called away. Do you even know how much I had to tolerate your daddy issues? I was stunned by the raw feelings he revealed. But Tiggs, now that he's finally dead, it's your turn to listen to me. He took an entire year, the old geezer. He continued to spew cold, harsh words. I was overwhelmed. I didn't want to believe this was who my husband truly was. But he definitely mocked both my father and me. I remembered my father's frail form curled up in the small hospital bed, fighting his illness. He had fought death to not leave his only daughter behind. Though I was left behind, would my father have wanted me to be at the mercy of my husband's whims? In that instant, I realized my love for my husband had vanished completely. At a time when I should have been mourning my father's death, my husband showed not a hint of emotion but rather seemed to revel in it. A tightness gripped my chest, making it hard to breathe. Nevertheless, I suppressed my feelings and repeatedly warned my husband. It's fine to live in the villa, but you'll regret it. Laughing, Alex replied, I won't. If he was going to be that adamant, then I'd accept his resolve. I packed only a day's worth of essentials and left the house. Being the minimal amount of stuff I packed, Alex looked suspicious. I simply responded, "I'll be back to tidy up later." Truthfully, I didn't want to speak another word to him. Ex-curious, I had no desire to see the faces of his parents, probably elated over my father's death and the subsequent move. Yet, I silently followed behind Alex. I couldn't bear the thought of them treating the cherished place my father left me any way they pleased. Though it's called a villa, it's just a house in a coastal residential area. The neighborhood is filled with everyday people leading their lives. However, its close proximity to downtown and its location make the land quite valuable. While exiting the train station, the scenery unchanged from my childhood continued. I remembered how, when I was a child and would fall asleep during train rides, my father would often carry me on his back. When we arrived at the villa, my husband's parents were already inside. I felt suspicious, and it seemed that my husband had taken a key without my knowledge and made duplicates. This realization deepened my unease. The fact they had been surreptitiously planning to move into the villa without telling me. I couldn't feel any trust in them at all. When his parents looked around the villa, their eyes sparkled with delight. It was a single-family home, but it was filled with furnishings that my father loved. Some slightly different, Western-styled furniture probably reflected my mother's tastes. Wow, this villa is fantastic. No more living in that cramped apartment. Living here or so blessed, exclaimed his mother. The picture of the view from the second floor is wonderful. Your sneaky dad, hiding such a great house. He should have shared it, we're family after all. Laughed his father. But their voices of joy grated on my nerves. They seemed to take my father's death too lightly. They saw the villa, an inheritance, merely as a luxury and beautiful stroke of luck. Indeed, this place is the best. We really should be grateful to your father-in-law. Thanks for leaving this villa for us. Running to the source of the scream, I followed shortly after. Pieces in the bathroom, his mother lay on the floor, clutching her foot, her face contorted in shock. The floor suddenly gave way. Her face mixed fear and astonishment, and her panting echoed throughout. It didn't give way. Maybe you just slipped. My husband and his father inspected the spot she was pointing at, looking perplexed. However, the floor was gleaming and perfectly intact. Still, she kept insisting that the floor had given way. After watching them suspiciously examine the floor, I finally spoke. Did you step on that part of the floor with a slightly different color? The three of them looked at the spot in amazement. Pushing through the crowd, I stepped on the part with a different shade. Yes! My husband exclaimed in surprise. Just when I stepped on it, the floorboard made a crisp sound and sank a little. But when I took my foot off, it rose back to its original position. If you weren't aware and stepped on it, it would surely feel like the floor gave way. See, the floor sinks a bit. It's like a trap. What kind of contraption is this? "Is this a defective house?" Explaining calmly. I faced their pressing questions. "It's not defective. My father had the house made this way." "What? It's a trap house?" "Actually, my father was a hardcore ninja enthusiast. His villa, a culmination of his time and money, was his masterpiece and treasure. The times he brought me here during my childhood were so that he could adjust or add new traps during the summer or Christmas holidays. So there are traps like the bathroom's pitfall spread all around the house. Shelves you shouldn't touch, floorboards you shouldn't step on, doors that won't open without a specific sequence, hidden doors, hidden rooms. It was a secret villa filled with my father's dreams. Naturally, it's not really suitable for everyday living. I've been visiting since I was a child and have instructions for all the traps from my father, but my husband and his family might not fare as well. I did tell you it's best not to live here, and it's a place filled with my father's memories. Everyone in the family knows how obsessed my father was with ninjas. In fact, it's more surprising that after being married for so many years, you didn't know. My husband, insisting he hadn't heard about the traps, was left speechless by my retort. His parents, of course, claimed they were hearing about it for the first time. They raged at my husband, blaming him for canceling their apartment lease, rendering them homeless. As the commotion continued, my father-in-law and husband got caught in another trap and tumbled over. But the sight of the two sprawled out on the floor brought a brief smile to my face. But immediately, I composed myself and said, "Please make yourself at home." They had been blinded by the villa's luxury, assuming it was a comfortable residence. They had ignored my warnings and failed to acknowledge the evident hobby of my father. Now they faced the consequences. Even when made aware of the potential dangers, they responded dismissively. "It's fine. What's the big deal? It's not a problem." Hearing that, I responded with a confident smile. "Well, I have to prepare for my move, so I'll be returning to the apartment for a while." And I left the villa. But of course, I wasn't really preparing for a move. I took a few days off to sort out my father's belongings. As expected, just 2 days later, my husband and his parents couldn't handle the life full of traps in the villa. It was a short time, but I felt positive as I reflected and started making plans for a new life. A tech note. Now about my father's villa. After I moved out, it apparently gained quite a reputation as a tourist spot. So it became known as the Mystery Mechanism Mansion, often featured in the local newsletters. Actually, whenever the villa was occupied, like during my father's time, visitors would come from all over to see it. I do recall in my memories unfamiliar faces touring the villa, local children playing, and my father proudly showing off his prized mansion to many people. Oh, I believe my father had listed both the villa and our ancestral home's phone numbers in those newsletters. And now the ancestral home's number no longer works. If there are inquiries, they would be directed at the villa. Well, I had honed my Chinese skills enough to handle calls from foreign guests. It seemed my husband and his parents hadn't. This on top of being constantly on edge because of the mansion's many traps and handling visitors and phone calls in foreign languages, they returned to the apartment looking utterly drained. How about we all live in this apartment? But the one to broach the subject was my mother-in-law. Desperately wanting my father's villa, they gave it up in just 2 days. Instead of tea, I handed my husband the business card of a divorce lawyer. We can't live together anymore, so please leave. Taking a deep sigh, I tried to explain patiently. Firstly, I couldn't stand his hasty decision to move in with his parents without any consideration. He never once discussed it with me, nor sought my understand it. To begin with, I was handling all the household chores, and he never once cooperated. While the household matters became solely my responsibility, causing immense stress, he never showed any signs of considering my feelings. He completely disregarded my feelings, acting selfishly even to the extent of moving in with his parents. There's no way I could continue living with someone like that. Didn't you love me? When my husband uttered such nonsense, I couldn't help but snort. I couldn't help but snort in amusement. How could I love someone who hoped for my father's early death and rejoiced when he passed away? I kicked the 3 of them out. This is my house. You should be the one to leave. My husband yelled, but I calmly retorted. Do you want to be reported for trespassing, or will you leave quietly? Did you forget that this apartment is in my name? At my words, they went silent. They had neither a house nor savings, and they were economically reliant. But before they could sweet-talk me, I was determined to evict them. Neither my husband nor my in-laws had much saved up. Having been evicted from the apartment and unable to return to the villa, they apparently now live together in a small, run-down apartment. This place is even smaller than the apartment we had before the villa. My in-laws complained constantly. My husband apologized at first, but gradually started to resent them. It's they being elderly, seldom work and quit after just a few days when they do. Their savings and pensions are dwindling due to their continuous moving. They constantly complain about each other and argue daily. Similar considering their current living situation, where neighbors complain about noise and they retaliate with annoyances. It seems they'll need to find a new place soon. My ex-husband once comfortably worked from home in the apartment, but now in their new place, there's no luxury of a dedicated workspace. His reputation plummeted and sales dropped significantly. Now he barely makes ends meet with late-night convenience store shifts. Juggling multiple part-time jobs seems more feasible now. It seems my in-laws believe their biggest mistake was getting roped into my husband's sweet talk. Every time they argue, they blame him for the issues with the trap-filled mansion. Alex would just turn beet red and shout in frustration. You should have researched that house more. At least this wouldn't have happened. It's not my fault. That woman kept it a secret. Don't talk back. If you had a proper relationship with her father, this could have been avoided. How did we end up in this mess because of our son? But let's not forget that they were the ones overjoyed at inheriting that mansion. I'll never forget that. After our divorce, I had a turning point in my career as a designer, taking inspiration from my father's passing and recent events. I incorporated ninja designs and shared them on social media. Before I knew it, I became quite popular, and one day, a major cosmetic company reached out. They wanted a package design with an Asian flair featuring ninja elements. I instantly thought of my father. Of course, so I eagerly joined the project, and after putting my heart and soul into it, it turned out to be a great success. Not to be a great success. My career became even more stable, and I had happy news to share at my parents' graves. The trap-filled mansion still stands. It's a place filled with special memories of my father and our family, so I've decided not to sell it. I've planned a proper visiting schedule, and with some tweaks, I realized I can offer free access to tourists and local kids. Luckily, media interviews started pouring in. My dad's trap-filled mansion became a major selling point, and when I said I wanted to use the funds for maintenance, some media outlets were willing to pay a hefty price. Soon, articles about the mansion were translated into French online, dubbing it a wonderful ninja legacy. Donations started pouring in from abroad. The donor was an elderly ninja enthusiast, just like my dad. I'm thankful for the donations, but it seems I'll be busy managing the mansion for a while. Meanwhile, at the mansion, kids' eyes sparkle every day. Wow, is this the legendary trap mansion? Are there real traps? Which ones? Tell me. Just local volunteers help ensure the kids play safely. Beside them, tourists are amazed at the secret doors that open when floorboards are pressed. Wow, this is amazing. We're so lucky to see such a special place. But our tricks are there here. Even though my dad has passed away, and I ended up divorcing because of the issues surrounding his legacy, I believe I've gained more than I've lost. The mansion has transformed into a new place where strangers can enjoy themselves and share memories of my dad. I've been reborn, looking forward to the future. Jessica is saying that she was pushed by you. I'm preparing a police report, so be ready. The look on Robert's face as he stared at me was one of deep disappointment. I would never do that. Jessica is, before I could finish, I heard a loud thud and found myself sprawled on the floor. Stop lying. It took me a moment to realize I'd been punched by Robert. I felt my face with a trembling hand and saw blood on it. I've heard about your harassment for a long time now. But Jessica always defended you. The tears welled up in Robert's eyes as he looked down at me. And yet, just because you didn't like her, you pushed her down the stairs. I can't believe it. I still couldn't believe the events from a few hours ago. Behind Robert, Jessica, leaning on crutches, smiled sweetly at me when our eyes met. That sweet face filled me with dread. Robert, stop it. Linda, along with someone else, rushed into the living room. She came straight to my side and wiped the blood from my face with a handkerchief. A person with her was a police officer in uniform. perfect timing. Arrest this woman? Robert, the one who should be arrested, isn't our mother? What? I have evidence. What Robert showed us next was shocking. It would soon reveal Jessica's true colors. I am Susan, 63 years old, with a son and a daughter. My husband passed away 3 years ago, and now I live with my eldest daughter, Linda. Although she's 33, perhaps because she works in a female-dominated environment, she's still single. One day, while living peacefully with Linda, I got a call from my son. Robert, "Okay, Mom, I'm gonna be transferred to your city next month." What? Next month? That's so soon. Robert got married last year and has been living in another state. His company requires a lot of relocation, and he only visited during Christmas. We've been looking for an apartment since last month, but Jessica couldn't find one she liked. Jessica, Robert's wife, is a young and pretty 23-year-old. I don't know what she sees in my son, who's turning 38 this year, but he's head over heels for her. Can we stay at home until we find a place? Our house is close to the station, so it's convenient for commuting. Our home is near a station, and a few years back, a big shopping mall was built nearby, making it a prime location. Well, let's meet up and discuss it. Got it. How about this Sunday? And so, after a long time, our whole family gathered. Hello, Susan and Linda. Sorry we've been away for so long. We really apologize for not finding a house yet. Seeing Jessica again after a while. She seemed very modern, almost like a granddaughter coming for a visit. We want to buy a house someday. That's why we're saving money now. It's hard to find a place that's affordable and to our liking. She seemed more mature than I remembered. However, Robert's job requires him to relocate frequently. I wonder what they're planning. We don't want to keep moving and uprooting our kids. Imagine them making friends, only to say goodbye soon after. Oh, Robert, I never thought you'd think about such things. I watched the two of them with a warm smile. I understand, but how about setting a deadline of 6 months? We have Linda here, and we have our own lives, you know? I get it. We'll probably find a place before that. Is it okay if we cover half the living expenses? Oh, Robert, I'm gonna look for a job nearby, so I have to contribute. I couldn't help but laugh. I'd always been concerned about Jessica, who's 15 years younger. 15 years younger, but she seemed more mature than I'd expected. Just the living expenses will be fine, since it's just for half a year. And so our temporary cohabitation began. At that time, Linda set some rules for the couple. Please don't enter my room and don't touch my things. I think you can distinguish between my stuff and Mom's. Okay. We'll be careful. You really don't like people touching your things, huh, Linda? Jessica cheerfully responded. Looking back, Linda might have felt like she was being intruded upon from that moment. It couldn't be helped. Robert and his wife would be living on the second floor, where Linda's room was also located. Actually, once they moved in, Jessica eagerly helped with household chores. She'd finish cleaning and laundry in the morning, leave to look for a job in the afternoon, and return in the evening to help prepare dinner. I absolutely love your cooking. Susan, my parents never really cooked, so I'm happy to be in the kitchen with you. Oh, can I taste this? Jessica was very friendly and effortlessly closed the distance between us. She had a way of getting into your heart, just like a kitten. After a few days of living together, I could see why Robert had fallen for her. Today, I got a part-time job offer. About 2 weeks into our living arrangement, Jessica announced this at dinner. It's a job shipping interior goods. Sounds fun, right? 5 days a week, from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm gonna work hard. Are you sure? You don't need to overdo it. It's all right. It's for our future after all. But I might not be able to help around the house as much as before. But I'll make sure to wake up early and not cause any trouble. Her determination made me want to support her. That's fine. I'll take care of the house chores so you can focus on your job. The first few weeks are always tough. And so, I took over all the household tasks. If it was to support Robert and his wife, it was the least I could do. It's with Linda helping out on weekends, it wasn't too bad. Once Jessica started her job, she seemed exhausted when she came home. I was glad I'd taken over the chores. One day, I witnessed Linda confronting Jessica. Hey Jessica, I told you not to touch my stuff. You've been using my cosmetics in the bathroom, haven't you? I'm so sorry. I'm saving money right now and can't afford to splurge. Jessica apologized with a puppy dog look, but Linda didn't seem to accept it. Just use other people's things and save money for yourself. If you do it again, I'll get upset. I'll get the money from Robert. Okay, I'm really sorry. As a caller, I was concerned about Linda's frustrated demeanor, so I called her to my room that night. She told a surprising story. That's when Robert wasn't around. Jessica would come to her room and complain. She's telling me to move to the room downstairs since I'm in their way. She acts all sweet in front of you. But she's really not. Knowing Jessica's amiable nature, it was hard for me to believe Linda. However, the tension between them was evident in the following days. Linda would get irritated, and Jessica would apologize. It was a common scene. It's on a Sunday evening, while everyone was gathered in the living room. Linda was folding the laundry. Jessica, at least fold your own laundry. Just because you started working doesn't mean you get a pass on everything, right? I'm sorry. I just got a bit lazy. I'll do it right away. Please forgive me. I'm really sorry. Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes as she went over to take the laundry from Linda. Okay, Linda. There's no need to speak to her like that. Just help her out. Robert then wrapped an arm around a teary-eyed Jessica. Jessica looked up at Robert with watery eyes. Jessica, I'm sorry about my family. Let's go out for dinner tonight. Mom. Linda, if you bully Jessica, I won't let it go. Saying this, the two left the house. What's with them? Robert is just too soft on Jessica. Ugh. So infuriating. Mom, let's go out for dinner tonight too. All right, but before that, I have something to discuss with you. Linda, I had secretly planted a voice recorder in Linda's room because I couldn't believe what she told me the other day. And what I heard was Jessica's harsh language, far worse than I'd imagined. And now there was this situation. I want you to live with your aunt for a while. I've already asked her. What? Mom, what are you talking about? I don't want to. Why do I have to? Please. Just until they move out. Perhaps Jessica was a lot more cunning than I thought. She intentionally angered Linda and played the victim in front of Robert. I didn't want Linda to be the villain in Jessica's narrative anymore. I want to protect you. Please, it's the biggest favor I'll ever ask of you. Maybe Linda sensed the urgency in my tone as she silently nodded. Despair was evident in her eyes. I hugged her and whispered, "We'll be back to our regular life soon." I needed to end this living situation soon. We were only 3 months away from the deadline of the living arrangement with Robert and Jessica. She's relaxed at home. She didn't show me any of the attitude she had with Linda, and that confused me even more. It feels kind of lonely now that Linda is gone, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Please think of me as your real daughter from now on. I think of you as my real mother. Jessica said with an innocent smile, but I felt mixed emotions. It sounded as if Linda would never come back. As days went by, Jessica began to act more and more spoiled, as if I really were her mother. "Susan, I want to eat that tonight. Susan, can you iron this for me? Susan, let's go shopping together soon." You an outsider, we might have looked like a real mother and daughter. But you let someone into your heart, it's hard to push them away for no reason. I continued living with Robert and his wife, feeling conflicted and uneasy. Around that time, whenever Robert was late from work, Jessica also came home late. And occasionally, she'd say things like, "Susan, can you lend me some money?" I started to hold back my thoughts more and more, thinking, it's only for a little longer. As Linda would visit on Robert's days off, sitting with her sipping tea, it felt as if we were still living together. Mom, I couldn't trust Jessica. After I moved out, I had a private investigator look into her. She's a big liar. What Linda told me was shocking. Jessica was working only 3 days a week, and the other 2 days she was meeting a man. At least 2 men, in fact. It seemed more like they were giving her allowances, rather than being romantic relationships, but Linda said seriously, "Jessica has someone else she truly loves. She seems to be giving all her money to this main guy. For Jessica, Robert might just be someone who gives her pocket money." I can't believe it. I was in a strange state of shock and realization. But I couldn't forgive her for involving and hurting my precious family. I'll gather more evidence and then talk to Robert. Peter, I don't want Jessica to do as she pleases, and I don't want Robert to get hurt. Linda seemed to feel the same way as me. I have been thinking I just needed to be patient a little longer, but that feeling was completely gone. I also needed to prepare for any unforeseen circumstances. Hey, have you guys found a place yet? It's almost the end of our agreed period. I hadn't heard much about their house hunting since we started living together. I'd always wondered if they were really looking. Yeah, we checked out some places near my office the other day. I found a few good ones, so Jessica and I will go for a viewing soon. That's good to hear. What? Robert, you said you'd leave it to me? I like it here. For 6 that Linda moved out, so why can't we just live here? I was at a loss for words. Jessica hadn't been looking for a place after all. At Patience, I had been putting up with her recent behavior, thinking it's only for a little while longer. No, you have to honor our agreement. The only reason I asked Linda to leave is because we agreed it would be temporary. I can't ask her to endure this any longer. Well, there's no place better than this one. She probably didn't expect me to refuse. For the first time, I saw a disgruntled expression on Jessica's face. We can't stay here, okay? Even if we have to pay a little more in rent. Robert was desperately trying to soothe her, but Jessica stormed off upstairs. Maybe this was the last straw, because a few days later, a disaster struck. That day, I was trying to carry laundry down from the balcony on the 2nd floor. I had washed sheets and was holding a large pile. Be careful. Susan, I'll carry it down for you. Jessica, who had apparently come out of her room, offered to help. Oh, thank you. As I handed her the laundry, Jessica smiled slyly. Susan, I always get what I want, no matter what it takes. Excuse me? I thought I had managed both Linda and you. Such a pity. I was confused, not understanding what Jessica was getting at. And the next moment, no! Mom, stop it! Suddenly, Jessica, still holding the laundry, dived down the stairs. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs. It felt like watching something in slow motion. Just with a loud thud, Jessica tumbled down. Bert, who was in the living room, rushed over to her. Jessica, call 911. A problem 9 was collation. Snapping back to reality, I quickly called an ambulance from my cell phone. That's when the ambulance arrived. Burkett accompanied Jessica to the hospital. I remained paralyzed at the top of the stairs, just alone in the house and still in shock. I found myself calling Linda. My voice trembled as I recounted the recent events. Mom, it's okay. I need to check something, and then I'll come over. Linda said and hung up. I don't know how much time had passed when I heard the front door open in the now dark house. I rushed to the entrance. Robert, how's Jessica? Behind Robert stood Jessica, her left leg in a cast and leaning on crutches. Perhaps the laundry cushioned her fall, as she didn't require hospitalization. Seeing Jessica with bandages wrapped around her slender arms and head was heart-wrenching. Jessica, are you okay? Hesitating to speak to her, Bert answered for her. What nerve do you have to ask that? What? Jessica said. You pushed her. We are even preparing to press charges. So be ready. Robert's face was filled with disappointment. But I wouldn't do that. Jessica just... Just as I was about to speak, I heard a heavy thud and found myself collapsing onto the floor. "Stop lying." It took me a moment to realize that Robert had punched me. I held my trembling hand to my face and saw blood. "I'd been hearing about your mistreatment of Jessica for a while, but she always defended you." Looking down at me, tears filled Robert's eyes. "And yet to think you'd push her down the stairs. I can't believe it. Even now, I still can't believe the events from a few hours ago." Behind Robert, Jessica, leaning on her crutches, met my eyes and gave me a sly smile. I felt a chill of fear at that seemingly innocent expression. "Look at this. There's no denying it," I heard Jessica scream. Robert showed me a video on his phone, which captured Jessica falling from the stairs. And standing at the top, it looked like I was looming menacingly over her. "Robert, stop it." Linda entered the living room with someone. She rushed straight to me and wiped my blood with a handkerchief. With her was a police officer in uniform. Just in time. Let's arrest her. The one who should be arrested isn't Mom. I've got evidence. If shown the earlier footage, anyone would see it as my wrongdoing. I was stiff with anxiety. Linda, alongside the police officer, reviewed the footage. "It's so clear from this angle. It looks like Mom pushed her." But the officer beside her nodded in agreement. "But what if we look from a different angle?" At those words, Jessica's eyes widened in shock. Linda took out her cell phone to show. Linda said, "After I left the house, I had a hunch about Jessica. So, I set up cameras all around the house." "Wait a minute. Isn't that an invasion of privacy?" "Oh, weren't you doing the same thing?" Jessica grimaced hearing that. From the footage on Jessica's camera, the angle was from below the staircase. Linda's was from the opposite side, concealed between a family photo on the shelf. For being closer to the camera, the audio was clear as well. "Oh, is this a joke?" She jumped on her own. "It's scary." I got a call from Mom and checked the camera footage. Thanks to Linda, my innocence was proven. Jessica wanted to live here with her true boyfriend. After getting rid of Mom, she planned to get rid of you next. What? A few days ago on the camera installed in Linda's room. But Jessica was enthusiastically talking about her plans over the phone with her affair partner. After realizing the seriousness of this incident, Linda brought the footage to the police. "Robert, it's not what you think. I did all this for us, for you and me. You know, she's got 2 other guys she's seeing, rich old men. I have pictures to prove it." "No! Linda is just trying to frame me. Robert, believe only in me." Jessica still seemed to think she could deceive Robert, even after all that's been revealed. She looked at Robert with desperate eyes, begging for him to believe her. But I had something that would reveal Jessica's true intentions. It was time. "You sure about that?" I did my own digging, asked Linda about Noah. Upon hearing the name Noah, Jessica visibly flinched. Noah was her main squeeze, She must have really fallen for him hard. Otherwise, she wouldn't have pulled a stunt like throwing herself down the stairs. And when I talked to Noah, both Linda and Robert looked shocked. I decided to visit the bar where Noah worked during the day. When I mentioned I was Jessica's mother-in-law, he was surprisingly willing to chat, perhaps to avoid any potential trouble. I retrieved a voice recorder from my room and played it back. "Oh, Jessica. To be honest, she's a handful. I'm just being nice because it's my job, but she's way too obsessed. We were even considering banning her from the bar." "What? I thought she was your favorite." "No, she's just another customer. She's not even my type and doesn't spend much. If you see her, tell her she's a nuisance." The color drained from Jessica's face. As for a popular guy like Noah, the amount Jessica spent on him was negligible. I didn't care if Noah was telling the truth. I just wanted to hear him speak about Jessica. It can't be. Noah wouldn't say that. We promised we'd be together forever. Oh? So it wasn't for Robert's sake after all. It's with a glare. Jessica lost her words as the officer apprehended her. Hearing Noah's own words must have hurt. We'll get the rest of the story at the station. As the officer began to lead Jessica away, Robert spoke up. "Jessica, didn't I tell you you can't live here? The house is under Linda's name." "What the hell?" Jessica turned around with a loud shout. Her face was flushed with anger, her emotions raw and visible, and with a fury that looked like she might lunge at Robert. She yelled just for that. "I broke my leg trying to get rid of Linda and that old hag, but it was all for nothing. No money, no house, you're just a worthless old man." Jessica continued her tantrum as the officer restrained her and led her to the patrol car. "Intent and deed, in my husband's will," it read, "the house is to be inherited by whoever takes care of Susan to the end." Robert, having no intention of returning to his hometown, had declined his inheritance. I'm sorry, what have I done?" Robert, despite his age, burst into tears. It was a relief that everything ended at just this. We were on the brink of letting Jessica single-handedly ruin our family. In the silence that enveloped our home, the three of us embraced each other. I was concerned for Linda. Linda worried for her brother and me, and Robert regretted almost letting his wife ruin everything. Being able to protect my precious family gave me profound relief. At the same time, I was deeply shaken by realizing the terrifying person I had inadvertently led into our lives. Jessica and Robert eventually divorced. Linda's investigative results and the footage from the surveillance camera proved useful in ensuring a smooth separation. Jessica was subsequently arrested. It seemed her plan was to oust me, take over the house, and then stage an accident to get rid of Robert. Even now, recalling the ecstatic look on Jessica's face as she dove down those stairs gives me chills. If Linda hadn't installed that camera, I might have been unable to defend myself. And there's no doubt in my mind that Jessica would have executed her subsequent plan. Her face at the time was filled with sheer madness. The three of us lived together for a while. Eventually, a year later, Robert was transferred again. He said he'd had enough of marriage, but as a mother, I can't help but hope he finds a kind companion. Miss Linda and I still live in that house, just the two of us. Well, I hope for Linda's marriage too, for now. I look forward to enjoying our peaceful life together. She just passed away. Read the stunned look on David's face as he stared at me standing in the doorway was forever etched in my mind. He seemed unable to grasp the sudden news of our daughter's death. What are you talking about? Stop with the cruel pranks. That's a terrible joke. Who was he to say such a thing? David mocked me as I stood there, soaked from the rain. It's not a lie. How could you let this happen? I'll handle the funeral arrangements, so please stay away from the house for a while. Goodbye? Seeing me trembling from head to toe, David finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. Leaning back in shock and muttering, "Is this for real?" But his reaction seemed so distant, so detached it grated on my nerves. I turned on my heel, rage burning inside me. I'll never forgive him. I'll make sure he pays, even if I have to drag him to hell myself. My name is Juliana Bridges. I'm 38 years old and work at an advertising agency. Our family consists of my husband David and our 8-year-old daughter Maya. We aren't rich, but we lead a comfortable life. That's because the ad agency I work for pays well, even compared to my peers with office jobs. I earn a hefty salary. I've never had to worry about spending money each month, and we've even been able to save up for Mia's college tuition, considering the cost of living and our home mortgage. We've always had some extra money left over. David was well aware of my high salary, and perhaps his pride was hurt, because a year ago he quit his job and started freelancing in web design. He said he switched to freelancing because his salaried job had hit its pay ceiling. But I was skeptical about how much one could really earn as a freelancer. Of course I objected when he said he wanted to quit. I thought it would be safer to stay in his job, get his full retirement benefits, and then think about other options. But David was adamant about freelancing, so that's what he did ever since he began freelancing. David has been working from home. Maybe his stated reason for quitting his job was just a cuzzer. And he was really tired of the office politics. Either way, I had to get used to a new routine where David was always home when I left for work. At first, Maya seemed happy that her dad was always at home when she came back from school. But lately, she seemed somewhat discontented. She probably feels like she's being constantly watched. She's only 8. But Maya is more mature than her classmates, so her life was going along without any major issues. But I didn't notice that the cracks started appearing when David began working from home. When David started working from home, I asked him if he could help a little with the household chores. "Can you help with things like cleaning and laundry? I'll still cook the meals like I always have." "Excuse me. Why do I have to do housework? You're home more and you have more free time. It'd be nice if you could help out a bit when you're not too tired." Free, just because I'm a freelancer doesn't mean I'm not busy. In fact, I've got a lot on my plate. I can't deal with household stuff on top of that. Unbelievable. David just brushed aside my modest request. I understand that freelancing can be more unstable and mentally taxing compared to a regular salaried job. That's one reason why I didn't want him to switch in the first place. But household chores are nobody's specific job, and I've been doing them all alone, even though we've both been working. I thought he could share some of the load, but I work too, you know. It should be equal. You've managed everything by yourself up until now. But start complaining now. David, who was convinced he was in the right, wouldn't listen to me at all. In the end, I continued to handle all the household chores as usual. I don't assume he's not busy just because he works from home, but whenever I return home late at night, expectation, I'd invariably find David sprawled in front of the TV or deeply engrossed in his smartphone. My policy is dinner ready. He'd ask with an air of entitlement, which always infuriated me. What's more, since working from home, he seemed to become more concerned about cleanliness, always demanding that I clean the house more thoroughly, pointing out every little piece of dirt on the floor, the windows, and the bathroom. If you're so concerned, why don't you clean it up yourself? I'm only human. I can't get to everything. I'd reply. You talking back to me? You clean up your own mess. It's our family's home. It's not like I'm the only one making it dirty. Yet, David would go off on these bizarre tangents, and I was utterly baffled by his logic. Mia would quietly listen to our exchanges from a distance. You know, it's always glued to his phone. I wish we could go out together on weekends, but Daddy's always busy on his phone. Maya said one Sunday morning as I was preparing breakfast. Apparently, Mia had asked David to go out and play the previous evening, but he'd refused, barely looking up from his phone. That's true, he's always on that phone, I acknowledged. He's been like that since before you come home from work. Sometimes he's on calls too. Calls. Yeah. He always sounds friendly, and I can hear a woman's voice. That's odd. He's from me as a kid. It didn't seem like David was talking to a client or a colleague. I tried to think of who he could be talking to so frequently as a freelancer. I was unfamiliar with the world of freelancing, so I didn't know, but the mention of a woman's voice was definitely bothering me. Or could he be having an affair? It wasn't unthinkable. He had started working from home only a few months ago, and he now had more free time than when he had a regular job. Trying to not let Aya see my agitation, I focused on preparing breakfast. Several months passed since David started freelancing. He still never helped with any of the household chores, and he began spending whole days away from home during the weekends. I have work to do. Freelancers don't get days off, he'd say as he left the house. His house dressed sharper than usual, even wearing cologne and accessories he didn't normally use. I had my suspicions, but with no evidence, confronting him would be pointless. Besides, even if David was cheating, I was torn about what I should do. I knew it would be better to part ways, but thinking of Maya, it wasn't an easy decision. Every day, he agonized over the potential consequences for Maya of taking her father away from her. As to prior lives continued in this way, but a turning point was soon to come. One Monday morning, as I was preparing for work, Maya didn't get up as usual, and I was getting anxious that she'd be late for school. "Maya, it's morning. You need to get up, or you'll be late for school." Up when I went to Mia's room to wake her up, she looked completely drained. I rushed to her side, placing my hand on her forehead. "You're burning up." "Maya." "Yeah." I got a thermometer and took her temperature. It read 103 degrees Fahrenheit. "I don't know what to do. I can't take the day off today." Well, I was panicking. David entered the room. "What happened?" "David, Mia's running a high fever. I can't take the day off from work today. Maybe we should call a babysitter." "A babysitter? I'll take care of her. Just let her rest, right? I can make her some soup. It'll be fine." I was utterly taken aback by David's sudden willingness to take care of Maya. David, who had never lifted a finger to help with household chores or child rearing, now offering to care for our daughter when she's sick. Unbelievable. Though I found it hard to believe. I decided to trust him given the urgency of the situation. "All right, thank you. There's some fruit in the fridge. Give her some if she feels like eating." "Got it," relieved by David's reassuring response. I hurriedly got ready and left the house. I was deeply concerned about Maya, but arriving at work on time was my top priority for the moment. By the time I reached my office in New York, the skies had darkened and it had started raining. Fortunately, I had a foldable umbrella with me, so I reached the office without getting wet. I think the meeting began in the afternoon as scheduled, but I couldn't stop thinking about Maya. The office was abuzz due to the sound of heavy rain and strong winds from outside. To think of it, wasn't there news about a hurricane approaching? I've been so busy lately that I hadn't been keeping up with the weather updates, but I remembered a warning about a hurricane making landfall tonight. During the meeting, all of my colleagues, including myself, were constantly distracted by the storm outside, frequently glancing out the windows. By 7 p.m., when I was finally done with work and heading home, the earlier storm had turned into a torrential downpour. Strength 2, a downpour causing several train delays. The train I was supposed to catch was also delayed, and the platform was packed with people. I was really worried about Maya, who was running a high fever and couldn't bear the thought of waiting there. I hurriedly left the station and began looking for a taxi. There were many others waiting for taxis too, so it took quite a while, but after about 30 minutes, I finally managed to hail one. After a 30-minute ride, I arrived home, but was speechless at the sight that greeted me. Maya. To my horror, Maya was lying unconscious in front of our entrance. I quickly scooped her up. "Maya, are you okay?" Trent and Siri, being me, might have comforted her, as after she whispered "Daddy," she just slumped, looking exhausted. Despite being drenched in rain, her body was burning up. I turned to the taxi I just got off from and knocked on the window. "I'm sorry. I need you again. Please take us to the nearest hospital." Seeing Mia's condition and my desperation, the driver quickly opened the door, understanding the gravity of the situation. I quickly hopped into the taxi. Mia, throughout the ride, I kept calling out to Maya. I felt if I didn't, something terrible might happen to her. I desperately wanted to know why she was outside in the first place, especially during a storm, but right now, saving her was more important. But despite the heavy rain and the slow-moving traffic, we finally reached the hospital. "Ma'am, do take care, especially if you're heading back in this storm," the kind taxi driver said as he dropped us off. "Thank you so much." With a kind-hearted driver seeing me off, I rushed Mia to the hospital. Even though the hospital was busy with many patients, the receptionist quickly realized the urgency upon seeing Mia's condition and got her immediate attention. 30 minutes later, a doctor finally examined Maya, informing me that she was semi-conscious due to a high fever. Thankfully, she had no physical injuries. If her fever reduced, she should be okay. However, given that she'd apparently been outside in the rain for hours with that fever, she had to be admitted immediately. "Mia, I'm so sorry. I hope you feel better soon." "Ma'am," a nurse said, "we'll take good care of her. You should rest today." "Thank you." After spending 5 hours at the hospital, endlessly staring at Mia's pained face as she slept, a nurse finally approached me. Though I wanted to stay by Maya's side, I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Having worked all day and then seeing Maya in this state, I was spent. I decided it was best to let the nurses handle it and head home. Everything that happened to Maya was undoubtedly David's fault. Distant Maya murmuring "Daddy" before passing out was evidence enough. It was inconceivable that Maya, with such a high fever, would willingly go outside, especially not during a storm. The more I thought about what David had done, the angrier I became, unable to comprehend or forgive him. All the way home, I pondered what to say to him. Picture if he hears that Maya is okay, he might think it's alright to continue with his reckless behavior in the future. I absolutely don't want that to happen. I needed him to deeply reflect on his actions, even more than feeling remorse. Fixed with a certain resolve, I headed home. When I arrived, wet from the rain, David was casually fiddling with his smartphone. Noticing me, he looked up in surprise. "Hey, where's Maya? Wasn't she sleeping at the entrance?" "She said she wanted to play outside. I told her not to, but she wouldn't listen." Seeing David ask that with such nonchalance made my ear boil over. Maya went out on her own. He's the one who tossed her out in the first place? I clenched my fists tightly and replied. As I stood in the doorway, David stared at me with a dumbfounded look, a look that burned into my memory. Since the shock of hearing that his daughter had died seemed too much for him to grasp. "What are you talking about? Stop playing sick jokes. That's in bad taste." That chained the nerve of him to mock me as I stood there drenched from the rain. "It's not a lie. What have you done? I'll handle the funeral arrangements, so stay away from the house for a while. Goodbye." Seeing me shaking with rage, it finally hit David how serious the situation was, and he blurted out, Are you for real? But his reaction seemed so detached, as if it was happening to someone else, which irritated me even more. I turned on my heels, the fury inside me blazing. I won't ever forgive him. I'll drag him down to hell if I have to. I stormed out of the house and headed straight for a hotel. I managed to find a vacant hotel and decided to stay there for a while. Although it would cost me, now wasn't the time to worry about money. I wanted to get back at David. If he felt remorse and changed his ways after hearing about Maya's death, and I might reconsider my approach. But seeing that he didn't call or message me that day, it was clear he couldn't care less about what happened to Maya. This only fueled my anger further, and I began to devise a plan to make him pay. The next morning, I woke up and immediately headed to the hospital. I got word that Maya had regained consciousness. Maya, are you okay? Mom, yeah, I'm fine now. My fever's gone down. Oh, thank goodness. I hugged Maya tightly and gently stroked her head. She giggled as if tickled by the gesture, pushing the joy of Mia's return. I eventually pressed her for the truth. Mia, what happened yesterday? Buddy kicked me out. I knew it. He said I was in the way and told me to leave. Then a woman came in and they chatted like they were close. Oh, what did she look like? I didn't get a good look, but she was young. She had bright red nails and wore skinny heels. I couldn't believe it. David was having an affair. Not only did he bring his mistress home on a day Maya had a high fever, but he also locked his own daughter outside. It was beyond comprehension. How could he do something so horrible? I'm sorry, Maya. That must have been terrifying. Yeah. But I was happy you came to save me, Maya. And for David to put Maya through such trauma and think he can be happy with his mistress, it was unforgivable. I felt a burning rage consuming me. By the way, Daddy said he's gonna invite that lady over again next Sunday. Next Sunday? That's the day I'm supposed to go on the company trip. He's planning to spend a fun day with his mistress while I'm away. I was appalled, but it strengthened my resolve. Thanks for telling me. I patted Mia's back, vowing to get back at David. The following Sunday, I decided to take Maya and return home. I informed my company that due to personal reasons, I wouldn't be able to attend the trip. After Mia was discharged, we had been staying at the hotel together. It had been a while since we were home, but as we approached the front door, it felt like we were entering someone else's house. Wishon. When Mia and I entered the house like usual, sure enough, there were unfamiliar high heels at the entrance. Just as Maya had said, but the thought of David and his mistress enjoying themselves deeper in the house made my skin crawl. David wasn't in the living room, so I headed to the bedroom. Thinking that Maya might witness something too intense, I hesitated for a moment, but the room was quiet. As I listened closely, I could hear David's voice coming from the bedroom. You know, it really worked out for me. Like sweat with Maya gone, it made breaking up easier. How can you say such a thing about your own daughter? But yeah, for me, it was kinda lucky. Hearing the two of them talking about Mia's supposed death, as if it was a good thing or lucky, made my head spin. It was clear now. David didn't feel an ounce of remorse. If that's the case, it's time to confront him directly. Excuse us. Oh, you have a guest? When Maya and I appeared after opening the bedroom door, the two of them were taken aback with wide eyes. Why the hell are you here? You said you were on a company trip. And why's Maya here? What do you mean? But wasn't Maya supposed to be dead? I suppose it would be quite shocking to see Maya, who they believe to be dead, standing right in front of them. I explained calmly. The part about Maya being dead was a lie. I'm sorry. I just wanted to see your reaction. I hoped you might show some remorse, but instead you're here celebrating Maya's supposed death. That's just insane. A lie? Damn it. You played with my feelings. Frustrated by David's feigned concern, I let out a heavy sigh. Don't mess with me. You're the one who kicked Maya out of the house, right? No, I didn't. Maya Daddy did kick me out. He said I was in the way because he wanted to be with that woman. With Maya's swift revelation, David's face turned pale. That's right. You did the worst possible thing, not just as a father, but as a human being. Maya was in such a condition that wouldn't have been surprising if she had died. And you prioritized being with that woman over her. Pointing at the woman, who had been silently watching our confrontation, I exclaimed, "Oh, calling her my mistress? That's not right. She's a colleague from work." What? Wait, didn't you say you quit your job and you're freelancing now? I'm caught off guard. David's hasty lie inadvertently confirmed she was indeed his mistress. Well, we don't really need to ask her now, do we? Here's the evidence of your affair. Private investigators are quite something. They gathered this much evidence in just a week. I thrust a large envelope towards David. After hearing about David's affair from Mia, I decided to get a thorough investigation. But I never imagined the evidence would pile up so quickly. Seems like David isn't very good at hiding things. Hesitantly, David opened the envelope, and as he pulled out the photos, he dropped them, scattering the evidence of his affair all over the floor. This is so unfair. Do you enjoy cornering someone like this and putting them in a situation where they can't escape? Even though he was entirely at fault, David tried to paint me as the villain, which I couldn't understand at all. I pulled out the business card of a divorce lawyer I had stashed in my bag and thrust it towards David. Unfair. Who's the real coward here? I see no worth in staying with someone so thoughtless any longer. Let's get a divorce. David's eyes widened as he stared at the business card. As if he truly wanted to be with his mistress, he should have been willing to accept the divorce easily. Oh, and by the way, once we're separated, you'll of course be responsible for asset division and child support. David, and you, I'll make sure to inform your company and your parents about everything. Be prepared for that. I glanced at the woman, his affair partner, when I said you. What? Why me? I didn't know anything about this. Don't you know? You destroyed a family with your actions. You have to take responsibility. The mistress began to panic and messed up her hair. Both Maya and I watched her coldly. Mia, still a child, seemed to understand what was going on and held my hand tightly. If you don't have the money, find a way to get it. You two are in love, right? You should be able to overcome this together. Just never show up in front of Maya and me again. Actually, I'll give you the house, but you're still responsible for the mortgage. Wait. David tried to protest, but I pulled Maya away. Yes, Maya is going to lose her father, but I have no regrets. I won't put Maya in harm's way ever again. We'll do our best from now on, okay, Maya? Yeah. Maya looked surprisingly happy, which put me at ease. I decided to go back to my childhood home with Maya and stay there for a while. My parents were livid with David for cheating and putting Maya through such pain to the point where they felt like giving David a piece of their mind. But I managed to calm them down and avoid further issues. You can stay here as long as you need. Thank you. Both my mom and dad seemed pleased that we had come, and Maya was thrilled to see her beloved grandparents. For now, everything seemed all right. But as for David, he got a lawyer and managed to settle the child support and asset division in one payment. I couldn't imagine David having millions saved up, so he probably took on some debt. And with the remaining mortgage to pay off, David must be stretched pretty thin right now. He's a coworker from my company who went to high school with David updated me about him. Apparently, he ended up breaking up with his mistress. David had boasted to her about having money, so when the truth came out, they quickly parted ways. David's income was already halved from what he used to make as a salaried employee, so it's understandable. Now, in addition to his freelance work, he's scrambling with various part-time jobs. After losing his wife, daughter, and mistress, David will probably live a frugal life, paying off his debts. He got what he deserved. I hope he learns from his hardships and regrets his actions. Mommy, today at school, I made Grandparents' Day gifts for Grandma and Grandpa. Really? Let's give it to them later together. Okay. Seeing Maya so lively and happy, even without David around, made me feel content. From now on, I'm going to move forward at my own pace, with Maya by my side. You seem alright. Not amusing though. Well, I was pregnant, and before reaching the stable phase, I decided to head back to my parents' home. My mother-in-law came to the train station to see me off. However, at that moment, I suddenly felt like I was floating in the air, desperately wanting to protect the baby I had longed for. I fell onto the train tracks, clutching my belly. Confused, I looked up at my mother-in-law, who was smirking down at me. It hit me then that she had pushed me. What the hell are you doing? I glared at her from the train tracks. Why would I want a grandchild with genes from a woman who can't even be a lawyer? No matter how cute. I don't want a child inheriting such stupidity. My mother-in-law laughed hysterically as she said this. I felt a chill down my spine at her attitude. But the next day, after suffering a stroke that left her partially paralyzed, my mother-in-law, using a cane, glared at me saying, "It's a good thing you're back. You see, Jessica, it's because of the stress you've given me that I had a stroke and ended up like this. You'll have to be my hands and feet from now on." She poked my belly with her cane, looking down on me. Without showing any respect, I was able to get away with it. Let's leave the rest to the cops. My name is Jessica Martin. At 35, while studying for the bar exam, I'm working as a paralegal in a law firm. I met my husband, Mike, when he was a newly minted lawyer joining the same law firm. Mike was always full of justice and always passionately dealt with his clients' issues. When he asked for my assistance, I would passionately help with the investigations. Gradually through work, Mike and I became close. One day after everyone had left the office and I was studying alone, Mike approached me. "Hey, studying for the bar exam, huh?" "Yes. I really want to pass it this time." "Well, I can help you out." From that day on, he would teach me almost every day. He would always explain things patiently. Then one day, after a study session, while we were out for dinner, he said, "Jessica, would you consider dating me with the intention of getting married?" "Really? Are you sure about someone like me?" Mike, who's 6 years younger than me and joined the law firm at the young age of 24, made me wonder if I was the right choice for him, considering his bright future. However, with his never-give-up attitude, he pursued me day after day. He's won over by Mike's passion. I accepted his confession a month later. From the beginning of our relationship, we both had the intention of getting married, and we tied the knot 3 months into our relationship. Mike's parents had divorced when he was in high school, so until he started working, he lived with his mother. And on the day I visited Mike's family home to introduce myself, I greeted nervously, "Hi, I'm Jessica. Nice to meet you." Seeing me so tense, his mother kindly said, "Oh, Jessica, no need to be so nervous. Mike, you found such a sweet and wonderful lady. I'm so happy for you." Ex-worst extra condition, despite being 6 years older than Mike, his mother welcomed me warmly. A month later, Mike and I registered our marriage. We were both very busy with our jobs after marriage and hadn't given much thought to having children. But about a year after we got married, I fell ill and found out I was pregnant when I visited the doctor. "Like your Mike, I'm pregnant, really? Awesome!" When I told Mike about the pregnancy, he jumped with joy. I also informed my mother-in-law, and she exclaimed, "Congratulations." Jessica, clapping her hands in delight. Around the same time, I found out about my pregnancy. I failed the bar exam I had taken. I was shocked since I believed I would become an attorney this time. However, being over 30 and experiencing the miracle of life inside me for the first time, I decided to focus solely on becoming a mother for a while. Given the risks of having a child at my age, I was filled with apprehension and doubts. Yet every day, I felt joy as I could feel the new life inside me growing stronger. It's when my morning sickness began. There was a work task I absolutely had to complete, so I stayed late at the office. While taking a short break and sipping on my caffeine-free herbal tea, I was suddenly overcome with intense abdominal pain, so severe I couldn't stand. I had a bad feeling. Without a second thought, I called a nearby hospital and took a taxi straight there. Upon arrival, the doctor's face turned pale, and I was immediately taken to a treatment room. "I'm sorry, but this time," the doctor began, informing me and Mike, who had rushed over, of the miscarriage. Losing the baby was devastating. Lying on the hospital bed, I turned away from Mike and sobbed silently. "Mike, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Jessica, losing the baby is heartbreaking, but I still have you. That's what matters most." His comforting words filled me with gratitude, guilt, and a profound sense of loss. But unable to hold back any longer, I cried out loud. The next day, my mother-in-law, concerned about my health, came over. "It's a shame. Considering your age, it must have been tough to conceive in the first place. Take it as a life lesson." As she sipped her tea nonchalantly, I couldn't believe my ears. Was she truly trying to comfort me? Her next words confirmed my doubts. "If you want a child so badly, hurry up and try again. If you can't conceive naturally, just consider fertility treatments." She laughed heartlessly. Honestly, having just lost a child, I wasn't in the mindset to think about having another one right away. Yet my mother-in-law was not only pushing for another child, but also suggesting expensive fertility treatments. I was too shocked to reply. About a year after the miscarriage, I became pregnant again. He's thinking of the first time. As soon as I informed Mike, he not only expressed joy but also showed concern for my well-being. We've been given another chance at life. I want this baby to safely come into this world. What do you think about staying at your parents' home until you're past the critical phase? That might be a good idea. I can take some time off work, so maybe I'll take you up on that. I then decided, based on Mike's suggestion, to spend time at my parents' home until the 5th month of pregnancy. Actually, when I called my parents to inform them I'd be coming in a week, they were eagerly awaiting my return. And 3 days before I was due to leave, I wrapped up my work and began my maternity leave. However, the day before I was to go to my parents, my mother-in-law unexpectedly stormed into our home. "Jessica, why are you going back to your parents? Aren't you supposed to have the baby at a hospital nearby?" "I'm so sorry. Mike was worried about me and the baby. We decided it's best for me to stay at my parents' place till things stabilize." Oh my! When I was pregnant with Mike, there was no luxury of returning to my parents. "I'm sure I've changed." She folded her arms and stared at me. "Well, that's all right. This baby is our family's grandchild too. I'm concerned as well. I'll accompany you to the station." But when I seemed intimidated by my mother-in-law's imposing tone, she asked me about my train's departure time for the next day. She then said, "I'll come over again in the morning before leaving." It's on the morning of my departure, right on time, my mother-in-law declared. "Then I'll carry your bags to the station, so let's get going." She took my suitcase with a forceful attitude and roughly dragged it along at the station. As we waited for the train station announcement came on. Standing at the very edge of the platform, I suddenly felt a lightness, and the next thing I knew I was on the tracks. Instinctively protecting my abdomen, I looked up from where I'd fallen to see my mother-in-law laughing and sneering at me from the platform. "Oh, you seem fine. What a disappointment. What did you do? Why would I want a grandchild with genes from someone who couldn't become a lawyer? Even if the child's cute, I don't want one tainted with your stupid." Blood chills ran down my spine as I looked at her. Because of my fall, the train was temporarily stopped, causing an inconvenience to many passengers. Despite my anger at my mother-in-law, I felt guilty toward the other passengers. I took a seat at the end of the train, heading towards my parents' nearest station the next morning, while I was still asleep. I got a call from Mike. "Hey, sorry for calling so early last night. My mom had a stroke." "What is she?" "Okay. Yeah. She's gonna live, but it seems she's paralyzed on the right side. It's gonna affect her daily life. I hate to ask, but can you come back?" "All right, I understand. I came to my parents' home to protect my unborn child, but now, because my mother-in-law collapsed, my brief respite was cut short." Feeling deflated but worried about Mike's unusually downcast voice and his mother's condition, I explained the situation to my parents and hastily returned to Mike's family home. "I'm really sorry, Jessica, you came here to rest for the baby's sake. And now this, it's okay. How's your mom?" "She said she could get home on her own and didn't need me to pick her up. She's in a cab now, should be home soon." As the two of us anxiously awaited her return, we heard the front door open. Hobbling in with a cane, she glared at me. "Mom." I was so worried. "I'm glad it wasn't more serious. Are you okay? Jessica, you're back. Did you miscarry again?" "No, the baby's still." I touched my stomach to show her the baby was okay. But she snorted and said, "If you're back, it's just perfect timing, Jessica. Because of the stress you've caused me, I've had a stroke and ended up like this. Well, you'll be taking care of me from now on. But you're Mike's wife. You have an obligation to take care of your mother-in-law." She then laughed and jabbed my belly with her cane. I desperately tried to shield my baby from my mother-in-law's assault, clutching my belly and bowing my head. "What are you doing? Do you intend to disobey me? I nearly lost my life because of you. Yet here you are, trying to bring a new life into this world, and it makes me so furious." I looked down, trying to hide my fear from her. "Understood. Let's leave the rest to the police." Reaching my breaking point with my mother-in-law's attitude, I half-laughingly told her. She just tilted her head in confusion. "Do you remember the other day at the train station when I fell onto the tracks?" "I remember. So, A police officer just came to this house because he wants to hear about what happened when the train stopped that day. What? Turns out a station worker who happened to witness the moment my mother-in-law pushed me had filmed the entire scene. That video is now being used as evidence, and the police wanted to hear both our sides of the story. When I told my mother-in-law, she looked as if she'd seen a ghost. That video from the station worker isn't anything special. So, do you want to check out the evidence together? What? How do you have video that a station worker took? He gave it to me as evidence. In front of my shocked mother-in-law, I opened my smartphone and played the video. She watched intently, her eyes glued to the screen. That hand in the video isn't mine. Isn't that the same ring on the hand pushing me in this video that you're wearing now? I paused the video at the frame where the ring was visible and showed it to her. There are plenty of people with similar rings. That video could have been edited by the station worker. I'm upset. Delete it. I'll delete mine. But it's also been submitted to the police. I can't delete that one. Realizing that the same footage had been submitted to the police, my mother-in-law went pale and started shaking. I also told the officer I'm pregnant since I'm not showing yet. You told them that too? Yes. They were quite shocked when I told them everything. I informed her that I had recounted everything to the police, and her face went beet red in anger. What? This makes me look like a criminal. Well, aren't you? But to think I'm such a terrible daughter-in-law. Fuming with anger, my mother-in-law glared at me. But I calmly poured some non-caffeinated herbal tea into a cup and offered it to her. Here, drink this to calm down. Oh, this herbal tea? Do you remember? My mom got this for me to help relax pregnant women. Taking the cup from me, my mother-in-law gulped down the tea. Why are you giving this to me now? Did you know this tea isn't recommended for early pregnant women like me? What? The pre-herbal tea my mother-in-law gave me when I was pregnant with my first child. At the time, I was so pleased with her thoughtfulness that I poured the tea into my water bottle every day and carried it to work to drink. However, when I miscarried my first child and was answering the doctor's questions, it turned out that the herbal tea my mother-in-law had bought was one of the causes. It came to light that the herbal tea she had purchased contained an ingredient that is not recommended for pregnant women in their early stages. Without researching it thoroughly, I drank the tea and ended up going through the painful experience of losing a new life. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known, I wouldn't have let you, a pregnant woman, drink it. Shaking her head, my mother-in-law denied knowing about the tea's ingredients. When I got pregnant this time, you gave me the same herbal tea as a gift again. Was that on purpose? Of course not. Also, the aroma oil you gifted me to help me sleep better. The store clerk informed me that it's not recommended for pregnant women in their early stages. That can't be. When I showed the aroma oil bottle to my mother-in-law, she averted her eyes. You mentioned at the train station when I fell on the tracks that I have stupid genes that can't become a lawyer, right? You can't be serious. I'm sorry. It's not my fault. Both the aroma and the herbal tea were gifts I got for Jessica after hearing from a friend that they were good for pregnant women. Please believe me, my mother-in-law, paralyzed on her right side, looked at me and apologized. Please don't abandon me. Now that I've become like this, the only option is to rely on Jessica to take care of me. Sorry. I refuse. Despite her pitiful eyes, I smiled at my mother-in-law and denied her caregiving request. How can you, as a daughter-in-law, refuse to take care of your mother-in-law? I am not your direct family, so I am not obligated to take care of you. Even when I spoke about the law, it seemed the mother-in-law couldn't trust me, so she turned to Mike to verify the facts. Mike, is that true? Jessica's right. Mom, Jessica isn't someone who should be taking care of you. Well then, Mike, why don't you take care of me? When the mother-in-law approached Mike's feet, she strongly grasped his foot with her unparalyzed left hand, desperately crying. Seeing the mother-in-law sobbing at Mike's feet was like watching a child. It was a pitiable sight, especially given her previously imposing demeanor. Trill, I'm not a lawyer yet, but with my paralegal work and the law studies I've done, I'm as confident in my legal knowledge as Mike. When I mentioned some laws about caregiving, it seemed the mother-in-law was genuinely surprised. When Mike gently shook off his mother-in-law's grip, she weakened from a stroke and fell forcefully onto the floor. She gave money to my friends, calling it a severance, complained loudly to waiters when we dined out, and even pushed my pregnant wife onto the train tracks. What's wrong with that? I thought I was doing it for you. Enough is enough. I've been fed up with your irrational behavior for years. I'm not taking care of you either. I'll find you a good care facility and you can live there alone. But the mother-in-law, who had lovingly raised her own son, felt abandoned. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing heavily. Hello, is Mrs. Catherine Martin there? Please, come on in. Hearing a policeman's voice from the entrance, Mike gestured for him to come inside, and the mother-in-law's face went pale. The mention of the police seemed to freeze the once vivacious woman, even with paralysis in her right side. You are Mrs. Catherine Martin, correct? Yes. We'd like to hear in detail at the station about the incident where your daughter-in-law fell onto the train platform. Will you accompany us? The mother-in-law was surrounded by several officers and resignedly allowed them to take her away. Later, the mother-in-law was interrogated at the police station. From stopping the train to pushing me, a pregnant woman, and my subsequent miscarriage, she was thoroughly questioned. Is our talk done? Please have mercy. Yes, it's true, I pushed my daughter-in-law onto the tracks. But I couldn't bear seeing a woman like her achieving her dreams of becoming a lawyer, getting married, and even having a child. You mean? She was getting everything I ever wanted. Marriage, becoming a lawyer, and having a child. I just hated her for that. It's in the end, the mother-in-law tearfully admitted to pushing me onto the tracks, but she vehemently denied causing my miscarriage. However, she couldn't escape the crime of pushing a pregnant woman. The mother-in-law became a criminal. And so, with paralysis in her right side, the mother-in-law had to spend some time in jail. A slight life in jail seemed to have many elderly inmates like the mother-in-law who needed care, and it appeared they couldn't indulge in any luxurious meals. Up until then, the mother-in-law, who used to behave so selfishly, had reportedly become much more subdued. Upon her release from jail, she moved into a care facility that Mike had prearranged, and it seemed she was living amicably with the other residents. However, about 6 months into her stay, the mother-in-law developed dementia as a post-stroke complication. Whenever Mike and I visited the facility to check on her, she would greet us with a bright smile and engage in small talk. "Hello! It's such a lovely day today, isn't it?" It seemed she had completely forgotten about her son Mike, me, and the rest of her family. The drastic change in the mother-in-law was initially shocking for both Mike and me. Yet seeing her participate in activities, taking walks, and generally enjoying her time at the facility surrounded by caregivers and fellow residents, she seemed as peaceful as a saint, which brought us relief. Later on, I safely entered the stable period of my pregnancy, and the baby inside me was growing healthily. Used to being on maternity leave and spending most of my time at home, once I finished my chores. I dove deep into studying for the bar exam and took it when I was almost due. A few days later, I began to feel labor pains and rushed to the hospital. The midwife informed me that I was in labor. Before I could mentally prepare, I gave birth to a baby boy. But to the moment he was born, he let out such a strong cry that he surprised the midwife and nurses. To the suddenness of the labor, Mike, who had planned to be there for the birth, missed it. But when he saw our newborn son, he gently held him and smiled. "He's so adorable. Hey, have we decided on a name for him?" While holding our son a bit awkwardly, Mike turned to me and said, "On the count of 3, why don't we both say the name that comes to mind?" We both chuckled. Picking Mike up on his suggestion, we both blurted out a name at the same time. I knew it. "Asuka, you were thinking the same thing." Mike and I laughed in surprise at having chosen the same name. Both of us, having a deep love for law and a strong sense of justice, had become lawyers. Considering the background of our family, we unanimously named our son Justice. A year passed, and our son grew big enough to walk on his own. Mike was hard at work as an attorney, and I was about to start my first day, not as a paralegal, but as an attorney, proudly wearing a brand new suit with my attorney's badge. Since the day the mother-in-law pushed me onto the train tracks, I learned that nothing good comes from envy or jealousy. But out of jealousy, she had pushed me, leading her to experience a stroke, time in jail, and eventually dementia, leading her down an unexpected path in life. For disturbing another's happiness out of envy is never a good thing. That to us, whether good or bad, the consequences of our actions always come back to us. Every morning, as I chase our lively son around the house and pin my attorney's badge to my chest, I'm reminded of the fight for justice,